Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Resilient Advisor. My name is Jay Coulter, and joining me for this broadcast is my friend Matt Halloran of Top Advisor Marketing. He is the co-host of the Top Advisor Marketing podcast with another friend of The Resilient Advisor, Kirk Lowe. Matt, thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure, man. It's an absolute pleasure.
You do a lot of work in the podcast space. Is this your first live stream on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube?
And I hope my hair's okay, Jay. I mean, you've got a nice head of hair, but I hope I'm not too shiny. Maybe I need to move around a little bit. But no, this is my first time. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. Dude, I'm always just behind the mic, right? I mean, that's it. Very few people get to see me. So I don't know if that's good or I don't know, whatever. But thanks for having me, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You and I both love playing around with these distribution technologies. It's how we got into podcasting to begin with.
Totally.
And I'm hoping as they roll out live streaming to our clients, right? Financial advisors, that they take advantage of this if it makes sense for their brand.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So for this podcast, let's talk about, I love your framework for becoming a micro influencer, because really that's how you and I both started. And you built a framework and process for getting this done. But let's start with exactly what is a micro influencer, specifically through the lens of a financial advisor.
Sure. And, this really just a brief history. So Kirk Lowe, my business partner, another friend of yours, we've all been friends for a long time now. He was trying to position advisors as being an influencer. And they were like, I don't know if I want that much responsibility. So we changed it to being a micro influencer. And then Kirk had this epiphany. And the epiphany is a micro influencer is a person who owns a specific expertise for a specific audience in a specific region. Here's the deal, Jay. Local news is dead. That's it. You have to be your own loud, dude. You have to make your own media. And we believe that doing this, the live streaming, doing podcasting, blogging, guest appearances, all of that can really, truly help you elevate your brand and get known in your area.
For anyone interested in going deeper on that concept of being your own loud, please go to topadvisormarketing.com and you can download that free report. You talk about local news being dead. It's amazing how most people can't even recall the last time they watched their local news.
I can't remember the last time I watched my local news. I mean, I listen to some local radio, but it's nationally syndicated, right? I mean, that we have like our college radio station and then we have our NPR station, and that's pretty much it. So, and people aren't listening to the radio. They want it to be more convenient, Jay. So that's why podcasting, we believe, is such a huge benefit.
Yeah. Well, you and I drink from that fire hose as it relates to a podcast for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go through your 7-step framework for becoming a micro influencer. And here's something to think about, Matt. I find that most advisors, especially if there's some season to them, struggle with building a niche. I struggle with coaching them to build a niche. And with that being your first step, that just seems to be so important. How do they do that?
It is. So the first thing is you have to give yourself permission to start. I just had a sales call, Jay, and I wish I would have recorded it. It would have been freaking awesome. But this guy's working in the oil and gas industry. And I said, okay, well, one of the objections that I hear all the time is that too narrow of a focus? Now he's in Houston, so it's not that narrow of a focus, but his website screams oil and gas. He only works with oil and gas executives and all of this stuff. And he said, look, Matt, here's how I position it. And this is so smart. He said, if they don't work in oil and gas, I make them feel even more special that I'm bringing them on because they're not part of my specific niche. And what I'll say is, hey, you know what? We like you so much and think that you're going to be such a good client that even though you're outside of our normal niche, so he's planting seeds the whole way, right? Hey, I work with oil and gas, I'd love to have you. You have to be as specific as you possibly can. I want advisors to find a niche and put that niche on their website and in all of their communications. It doesn't prohibit or inhibit you from getting new clients. It actually helps you get the right clients that you want to work with. And when you go to sell your practice, Jay, you're going to make so much more money because you're the guy, right? You're the person who owns that niche. It just works, dude.
Yep. And from a practitioner standpoint, you're better able to serve those clients.
That's absolutely correct. Your communication is going to remain consistent. You know exactly how to communicate to them. Your service model, your events, your educational events, everything all of a sudden starts like kind of meshing together. And you're like, okay, I finally figured it out.
Yep. So go a little bit deeper on hosting a podcast and bringing in non-industry specific folks. I tell you, with my own podcast, the Resilient Advisor, I've brought in folks like yourself, and then folks that can speak about the economics, portfolio construction, compliance, which aren't the most popular episodes. But I had an advisor suggest to me in the fourth quarter that for this year, I look outside of the industry and bring on folks that have nothing to do with financial services. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's magnificent. One, because life is a lot more about life than financial services. So if you're an advisor, we highly recommend that you bring on real estate professionals, trip professionals, life coaches, retirement coaches, people who work in assisted living facilities. One of the best podcasts we ever heard was a guy who brought out a plastic surgeon and talked about how you can age gracefully. Really, really well done. And the advisor just kind of sat back, did what you and I do, kind of bounce some questions off of the person. But here's the best part. That plastic surgeon shared that podcast with his entire network. So all of a sudden, he just opened up a whole new marketplace for his thought leadership that was super powerful.
Yeah, that's great. And it adds value. It adds some different aspects, to the podcast to keep listeners engaged. I'll tell you what I've experienced in our industry. You and I were one of the first podcasters in the space. Yeah. Now there are a lot more. And, most folks are interviewing the same people, bringing a lot of the same content, and that differentiation would help. And if an advisor were to start from the beginning doing that, it sounds like it could be pretty impactful.
Yes.
All right. Your second step in the process after you've identified that niche is to get your thought leadership in the can. What do you mean by that?
Well, so the questions that I ask advisors when I'm giving this as a keynote speech are, are you on camera for a living? And people will say, maybe one or two will say, yes, I do lots of video. Do you write for a living? And most advisors are like, I freaking hate writing. I'm not very good at it. But what do? They talk for a living, right, Jay? That's what they do. That's why we think podcasting is so powerful for them, because this is the natural medium that they use. Now, as a speaker like you are and like I am, this just made sense. But you have to get your stuff in the can, and you have to have a deep can. You can't do 5 podcasts and quit. You have to consistently deposit in that karmic pool of knowledge on a regular basis. We recommend twice a month, but you have to get it in the can. That's what you want to do. We also, so on topadvisormarketing.com real quick, and Jay, I'll make sure you get a copy of this. We have how to start your own financial podcast for free. Everything you need to know, from equipment to editing to everything. I'll make sure you get a copy of that too. We don't care if you do it with us. We want everybody out there to rise above the noise and truly get their voice out in the marketplace. Did that
That'd be a fantastic resource. Sure. I'll put links to it in the show notes.
Thank you.
You and I are both big advocates of it, and we know how much it could help. The hardest thing is to get started.
Yeah.
And I love your thought there that most advisors, while they might not be excellent writers, they all talk. If they're successful, they're good at talking.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, and you talk about having enough episodes in the can. You know, I've had comments made to me over the last maybe year and a half where they'll say, well, oh, you have a podcast, Jay. Everybody has a podcast. And just like everybody writes a book, while that might be true that everybody has a podcast, there are a lot of dead podcasts out there.
Totally.
And it's the consistency that really helps bring you the value over time.
Right. So you've done over 100, right?
I'm coming up on 100. I'm like 90. I think this will be 98.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. People, well, one, we want you to have a lot in the can because people binge listen. Right. So we're releasing our 250th episode in February.
Wow.
We publish and produce and syndicate over 100 podcasts a month with the company. I've got 6 other podcasts that I do outside of Top Advisor Marketing. It's people want to know that you're committed. That's it, man. And Jay, that's why people love this podcast that you do. This Resilient Advisor podcast. You have shown repeatedly that you want to elevate the industry. And I think people respect you for that. And you've been consistent in putting stuff, as we say, in the can, so that people can look back and say, I wonder if Jay ever talked about this, right? And then all of a sudden they type it in like, oh my gosh, she's got 3 podcasts about this. And then they're very grateful. And then we start seeing the principle of reciprocity, which is they're going to like, share, and comment on your podcast and potentially hire you as their business consultant, because you've been giving so much stuff away for free.
250 episodes. Wow.
Yeah,
that is fantastic.
Dude, we wiped our first 50.
Is
So
that right?
Kirk and I, it was called Mod Marketing, Marketing for the 21st Century. I think I actually came up with that title, which I'm not the branding guy for our company, but we dumped 50 of them. We just were like, nope, these aren't good enough. We're rebranding. And then we basically started over. But I probably record 4 or 5 a week. So.
Wow. Have you found yourself, this started happening to me in the past year, somebody will say, oh, Jay, I listened to your podcast, and it was like episode 25, where you were talking with somebody and you said this and you just can't remember, but that's how far back they go.
Oh man, I people will ask me all the time, hey Matt, I know that you did a podcast and you interviewed this Olympian. And I'm like, I've interviewed 6 Olympians. Like, which Olympian are you talking about? And even if I probe more deeply, here's the deal. And this part is just how my brain works, Jay. I forget. Like I have to be so in the moment with podcast, dude, that once we're done with the podcast, I don't think about it again because I need to move on. So.
Yep. All right. So the third step in the process is to identify your ideal client.
Right.
An exercise a lot of advisors have gone through, but specifically, how does that fall into the framework of becoming a micro influencer?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm actually going to blend a step 2 or 3 and 4 together because I've already been talking too much and we're rolling on time. But number 2, man, I think this will make more sense. So when you sit down and close your eyes, financial advisor person, you should be able to see in your mind's eye exactly who you want to work with, what that person looks like, what that person dresses like, what they do for fun. So not just the demographics, but the psychographics. And I think that shift between demographic and psychographic is where everything changes for an advisor, because most advisors will say, well, my ideal client is a person who's age 55 years old, they're married, they're an executive, they have a complex compensation plan, and they've got $250,000 of investable assets, but when they have a rollover, it'll be 1.5 million. Great. Like, I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I want to know, are you going to go out and have a drink with that person? Right? Is this the kind of person that you want to play golf with? Because if we start replicating those people, then it doesn't feel like work anymore. And then what you do is you interview that ideal client and start showing that social proof that this is who I work with. I work with physicians who are orthopedic knee surgeons, and that's my specialty. I'm going to interview a whole bunch of them and find out what their life is like and what they do for fun. And that's the sort of stuff that makes such a huge difference. And that's why identifying your ideal client and then interviewing your ideal client and then interviewing people who surround that ideal client, right? Let's say that your ideal client really does love to golf. Well, bring on a freaking golf pro, right? Interview a golf pro. So, yeah.
Yep. And think about the layup call. So I'm going to talk about myself like any good podcaster. So we're going to start a new series. It's tentatively called How I Serve, where we're going to interview advisors about how they built their business. They're going to be 20 minutes like all of our podcasts. So think of, Kitsis's 2-hour podcast shrunk down into 20 minutes to ferret directly into the best information. But here is my call into these ideal clients of mine. It isn't, hey, do you want to talk about a coaching or consulting engagement? It's, man, I have a podcast and I have a platform that reaches thousands of people every week. Would you like to come on and tell your story? That's it, right?
Yeah. Dude, people love to talk about themselves. It's just that simple, right? And we have this so structured that we have a podcast guest system. And so it shows you how to have that conversation, how to follow up from that conversation, how to get them on the podcast. And then what do you do, which is step 5, which is the next piece, which is ask them, your guests, your ideal clients, or in your situation, your ideal prospects, your ideal centers of influence, and ask them to share the podcast with their whole network, dude. If you do it right, it's going to be almost like a 20-minute commercial about how freaking awesome that person is. And why aren't they going to share that with absolutely everybody? We want them to actually sign something that says that they agree to share this with their social networks and email lists and things like that. So yeah, that's super powerful. Jay, that's why your podcast is blown up, right? That's why our podcast blew up. We started asking every single solitary person, sure, heck, when you were on the podcast before, my closing is, Jay, the only thing that I ever asked for you to be on this podcast, that you share this with your network. I can't thank you enough. You can tell it's scripted, right? I've said that 100 times, but or 250 times, but yeah.
I love the idea of having them sign something, say they would do it. I've never done that. I've actually was surprised, and this is when I was a newer podcaster, that somebody would take the time to go through a long interview that they had to prep for, and then they didn't share it with their network. I just assumed. What you're saying is you can't assume. You got to get them to commit to do it in advance.
No, and you know as well as anybody from being a business coach and consultant that getting somebody to sign something kind of makes it official.
Yep. Yep.
Also shows you're wicked organized too, dude, which is really good. And they like that when they see that you're super professional. But yeah.
Yep. All right. So then the last step, the biggest no-brainer in the process, to repeat and gain momentum. But let's go specifically about when you hit the wall. When you're looking at your stats in Libsyn and you only have, 50 downloads that first podcast, and you're 10 of them and your mom might be one.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. First off, I want to take one step back because I merged the two, but I didn't have it. I didn't bring up the multiplication of the content. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do that before I jump into the gain momentum, because this is how you get momentum. So this is important. So there's a guy named Gary V, right? Most people know who he is, and he swears a lot. But one of the things that he does is, so video is his medium, right? So he'll shoot a video. It'll be a 30-second, 3-minute, 30-minute video. And then he hands it off to his team. And what his team does is they chop it up into hundreds of social media posts. So Gary is everywhere all the time because his team chops that stuff up. And you have to do the same thing with your thought leadership. Any good podcaster is going to transcribe their podcast. And then all you do is you take a highlighter, you highlight your good stuff, right? You hand it off to your team member. They take it, they turn it into social media posts. And that's how you get way, way more legs to your podcast, which gives you momentum. Podcasting can be terribly depressing. It's a long game, brother. And I want everybody to understand that just because you put out a podcast does not mean anybody's going to listen to it. You've got to do your own organic marketing, but you also have to get 24, 36 podcasts in the can. And then all of a sudden you see a big shift. When we hit 100, our 100th episode was with Michael Kitz's, and which was hysterical because he's like, I don't think I can get this done in 20 minutes. I was like, yeah, you can, dude. You totally can. He's like, my podcast is 2 hours. I'm like, I know, and you got thousands of listeners. But
wait, hang on. Did you get it down to 20 minutes with?
It was 37 minutes, but it was still pretty good.
For him, that's really quick.
He was such a gracious guest, and dude, he has helped with this movement for us, right? You and I and the other people, Steve Sandusky has a podcast. There's a whole bunch of other people who have podcasts out there now who are people like us. And he really helped jumpstart this. I'm hoping that Top Advisor Marketing helped with that too, but I know Michael has made a huge difference. But you have to gain momentum. We actually call it momentum marketing. So as a micro influencer, you have to create momentum. This is the long game. Seminars, educational events, referral workshops, that's not a long marketing game. Those are short pops to make good money and to build up your business. But if you really truly want to have a direction, planners don't plan for their business. Plan for your business and have this be part of your marketing plan.
Yeah, and stay the course. I love the idea of committing to 24 or 36 episodes before. Gosh, wouldn't it be great if you could get advisors who get into podcasting to not even look at their stats until they get to those numbers?
So we talk about ROI, and we get asked, I get challenged on that, Jay, all the time. Okay, well, what's my return on my investment? Mm-hmm. And I'll say, well, if you get 2 clients, you paid for our whole program, right? Standard $1 million at 1%, right? But here's the kicker. It's not return on investment, it's return on time. And I have to have people understand that. People who listen to your podcast are pre-sold. People who are sharing your podcasts are giving your business legs without you even knowing it. It also gives you practice on your talking points, and it also gives you a great opportunity to show your clients that you're contributing to the thought leadership in the community by putting out the podcast. You should be talking about your podcast in client meetings. Hey, Jay, I heard, you just asked me a question about the new Secure Act. Well, I don't know if you know this, but heck, I just did a podcast on that. Now I'm going to answer your question today, but if you know anybody else who has any questions about moving from 70.5 to 72, here's the deal. Just share the podcast with them. It's super, super easy. Return on time, not return on investment.
I love it. Tell me a little bit about your program from the context of an advisor that's new, looking at getting into podcasting. If they were to call me, I'd say call Matt or go figure it out yourself. So what's the experience going to be like for an advisor that looks at your program to start podcasting?
Sure. Well, first off, you do not have to use our program, right? Just so we're abundantly clear. We have the free paper, which you're going to put in the show notes. So it's going to walk you in how to do it, but it's going to take you 8 to 12 hours a month to do it yourself. We get that down to 2.5. right? So it's 2 podcasts a month. You're going to show up with one of our voice talents. We record the podcast, produce and syndicate it, which means we put it out through every single solitary channel that your compliance allows. And then we multiply that content for you. So we put about 1 social media post out per day in order for you to stay relevant and top of mind. We help you come up with the podcast topics. You go through our podcast coaching program, which we review a podcast with you every single solitary quarter, actually 2, and talk to you about how you're doing, your ums, ohs, so's, you knows, transition, salesiness, all of that sort of stuff. So our goal is to make you the best podcaster possible. And Jay, one of the reasons why I don't coach anymore is because advisors kept telling me, Matt, I don't want you to tell me what to do. I want you to do it for me. And so Kirk and I built this whole program, brother, on doing everything we possibly can. So really for 2.5 hours of your time a month, we take care of all of your marketing and all of your social media posts. We do it for you. So that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How could listeners find out more about that program? Is it just topadvisormarketing.com?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you haven't followed me on LinkedIn, and if you haven't followed Jay on LinkedIn, then you're really missing out. Please make sure you follow Jay on LinkedIn. He puts out great stuff all the time. Follow me, Matt Halloran, and Kirk Lowe on LinkedIn. We're giving away stuff for free almost every day, every other day. And so we talk about the program every once in a while, but we do the same thing you do, Jay. We're just going to give it away for you. There are people who want to do it themselves. Super duper. Just get out there. There are people who want to delegate it. We would love to be in consideration for one of the people to delegate it to.
Excellent. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the podcast again. You are always one of my favorite guests.
I love this, dude. Being behind this microphone just freaking makes me happy. So thanks for letting me have another opportunity to talk about stuff I love, man. I appreciate it.
We are